Good morning to all of you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. So we will start our lecture today now. Considering what we were discussing, let me quickly recap. We were discussing the fourth level of mindfulness. First level was the body, mindfulness on the body. The second level was about being mindful of feelings or sensations. Third level was being mindful of mental state. And this is the fourth level where we become mindful of selected mental objects, objects or mental qualities. So today, we will have to focus on this area, the hindrances. Remember last time we finished aggregates, 5 of them were there. And the week before we finished sense faculties, 6 sense faculties. And I saw in your journals that some of you have been practicing well about becoming mindful of these mental objects. Hindrances is the topic today, which is very, very important, especially for your studies. Not only about the studies, but also about your happiness. So one of the very important areas we are about to discuss now. These hindrances are also mental qualities rather than saying them, identifying them as mental objects. You can consider these as mental qualities. So let us look at how many hindrances are there in our mind. Okay, what is the definition of a hindrance? How to overcome them? Those are the things we will be discussing today. And we will have a certain time to do a meditation on hindrance. And today our quiz will be not just before the break. I scheduled it to the very end of the second half of the lecture. So just before we finish, we can do the quiz and complete the lecture. Okay. So hindrances, I think you have experienced them. You can reflect or try to remember situations that you faced. Well, ever experienced that the mind does not concentrate on a selected good thought, although you tried your best? I think you would have experienced this. Sometimes when you study for exam also, you find this. You want to concentrate on a particular thought, a particular theory, but although you try your best, there are times that the mind will not obey, will not concentrate on the topic. Okay. So think of such situations you faced. Then another situation where the mind will not calm down or settle down, however hard you try. It gets too excited or too annoyed and will not settle down. Although you want to calm down, it does not happen the way you want. Have you experienced? Third scenario could be mind becoming unhappy when you are alone, although you want to be happy. You want to be happy, but sometimes these unhappy thoughts will take over. So all these kind of situations, and there are many more situations I can give as examples, I'm sure each one of us have experienced. Well, these scenarios is not a fault of you actually. It is due to the hindrances in the mind. So hindrances are the culprits. If you can identify them and clean them, this kind of situations you can manage better. You can manage well. So that is the purpose of our discussion today. Let's identify hindrances. In short, in a very short sentence, this is how we can define it. Hindrances are the mental qualities that hinder the progress towards concentration in meditation. In meditation, this word concentration is sometimes referred as samadhi. Concentration is referred as samadhi in meditation. But in general terms, concentration, what does that mean? Single pointedness of the mind towards whatever you are thinking. Suppose you concentrate on your studies on a particular subject, you want the mind to be single pointed towards that rather than thinking of many other things. So that is the average normal definition of concentration. But in meditation, it goes little beyond that definition. And I will give you an idea about samadhi states later. So this word concentration is used to refer to samadhi. And a higher level of samadhi is sometimes referred as absorption states. So remember the two words, concentration and absorption. Concentration is the initial levels of samadhi, and absorption means higher levels of samadhi, higher states. Remember the mental states, there were higher states in that diagram we studied earlier, but we did not discuss them very much. We will discuss them through this topic. In fact, these are the very mental qualities that block or prevent us from experience inner happiness available in our minds. And when inner happiness is not experienced, people will go in search of happiness from outside. So the hindrances are the mental factors or qualities that block this inner happiness being available to you. So if you can identify what are these blocking factors or hindrances, and if you can identify how to manage them, how to overcome them, of course you can uncover this inner happiness available in your mind. So these are the two main factors I can mention about the hindrances. Then we will try to identify them by name. There are 5 of them. 5 of them. Let's give names to them. And after that, we will identify their characteristics. How do we feel when a particular hindrance is taking over our mind? Right? Let's try to identify. Okay, we use this model called 5 forces model because hindrances are like mental forces. Mental forces, one of them is the sensory desires, or we call them sensual lust, right? Which is the desire to go for pleasing colors, the pleasing sounds, taste, touch, and all that. I think you know already about those 5. So when the mind is urging, or when the mind is urging to gratify such desires, it's a big force on the mind. So it's one of the hindrances to our inner happiness and one of the hindrances to our studies also. Okay. There is a second one, again very forceful, which is called the aversion or ill will, sometimes called anger, hostility. Those are the words referring to this. You know, I think you have felt it. Anything when you experience something you don't like, something which irritates you, this aversion mental quality will be present in the mind. Third one is sloth and torpor. I will have to explain it a little more later. There are two factors here, sloth as well as torpor, but we will put them together into one group. Worry and restlessness is the fourth hindrance. I'm giving a description on each one later. Then fifth one is called skeptical doubt. It's about the doubt actually. So when these five are very forceful. What do we mean by that? Forceful means when they arise and take over your mind, you become helpless and you need to oblige to the force, agree with the force and go along with it. It's very difficult to go against these hindrances unless you train your mind through meditation. Now, let's look at one by one. What are these forces and how do they look like? Or how do they feel like? If you get any questions, please put on the chat or please speak up. It will not disturb me. I would like you to ask any questions if you are having any doubts. Okay. You can see there are 7 words here, although we call them 5 hindrances. What are the words? Here, a sloth and torpor, 2 words. Worry and restlessness, 2 words again. Therefore, it's actually 7 distinct mental qualities. However, we group them into 5 for a particular reason, which I will be highlighting a little later. Right? Okay, let's take them one by one. Before that, the diagram which I showed you last time about thinking of yourself as a system having inputs, a process, and output. Inputs are coming from the 6 senses, processed by the mind here. The outputs are the 3 types of volitions. So that's you in a summary, in a nutshell. Then this mental process happening here within the mind is being forced by the 5. So 5 forces will pull your mental process in different directions and will eventually result in certain mental states. I will relate these mental qualities to mental states later. Each of these five is a kind of pulling force on your thought process. So they will pull the thought process in a particular direction, and unless you are aware, unless you become aware and take control again, you will be forced to act certain way by the hindrances. Okay, first one. We are going to discuss them one by one. First one, the correct name is passionate sensory desires. Alternative name is sensuous lust. So passionate sensory desires or sensuous lust. What does that mean? Let's define. It is that particular type of wanting in the mind or desire in the mind that seeks for happiness through the 5 senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and physical touch or physical feeling, which is a drive towards seeking happiness from outside through the 5 senses, focusing on external objects or external situations. You seek happiness. and you have found some kind of happiness through seeing, through sound, through smell, through taste, and through physical touch. And you want more. And that is the wanting. That is the wanting which become very forceful in our mind when it arises, and will take control of our thought process to take it in a particular direction. I'm sure you have experienced this daily in your daily routine. Therefore, I don't need to explain very much. So when this desire, when this lust take over, let me give an analogy for that. Think of a water surface. Think of a small pond where the water can be used like a mirror, so that you can look over it to see your own face. If you look into the pond, you will see your own face on the surface of the water. So when passionate sensory desire takes over, it's like the water in the pond mixed with a dye, colored. So the mind gets colored with a dye, and it is your own image is difficult to see through the color. Consider it as an analogy to remember the passionate sensory desires. Okay. So when there is an urge to listen to a certain pleasing sound, music, I think there are times that you oblige, right? Pleasing smell. Sometimes a person you love, you might think of, and then the mind gets directed. The whole thought process gets directed towards the colors, sound, smell, taste, physical feeling you have experienced when being with the person. Right? So likewise, this is the drive. I'm sure you can relate to your own experience. Let's look at the second one, which looks like the opposite of the previous one, the aversion. I think I have explained the aversion earlier also. Check whether it matches with this description. Aversion include all kind of thought related to wanting to reject, feeling of hostility, resentment, hatred, anger, bitterness, all that belong to this category called aversion. And it is a forceful thing. You know, when aversion takes over your mind, your whole thought process is like hijacked. And it looks like you can't come out of that kind of thoughts. And more you think about that situation, the more you get involved in your thought process. So that is aversion. It's a forceful thing. It's a forceful thing. Again, you can try to relate to the times where you experienced it yourself, and then it will become more clear. Third force on our mind is, before that, an analogy of the same water surface. It's like that the water is heated and boiling. And on a water surface which is heated, boiling and dancing, you can't see your own face, even though you look over it. So it will prevent you seeing it, seeing yourself. Third hindrance, sloth and torpor. Okay. This is a kind of laziness in the mind. Heaviness or dullness of the mind as well as the body, which induce some resistance or inertia to the thinking process. Have you experienced that? Dullness or laziness of the thought process. And when that takes over, you find that the mind is like sleepy, not interested in actual involved thinking. Has this happened to you in a lecture? Sometimes it happens, isn't it? The mind becomes bored, becomes dull, the thought process becomes very lazy, and there is a lot of inertia within the mind to the thinking process. So thinking itself is slowed down. And that is the time you feel sleepy. So sloth and torpor are slowing down our thinking process. And that's also part of our life, isn't it? From time to time, we experience that. Okay, I'm checking whether in the chat whether I'm getting any questions so far. Nothing. Number 4, fourth force in our mind. Before that, the analogy of the water surface is it's similar to the water in the pond covered with algae. That green algae has covered the surface, and therefore it's difficult to see your own face. Difficult to see your own face. Give me a minute. Right. So it has obscured your own view because the pond is now covered. Fourth one, worry and restlessness. Do I need to explain these two? Worry, what does that mean? When you think of the past, you get worried. You get worried about things that has happened, things that has not happened, things that had happened in a particular way. So thinking of the past, or when the mind dwells in the past, worries will leak into the mind, leak into the thought process. And you might worry that it would have been better if that thing did not happen, or would have been better if that did happen. Likewise, various thoughts of worry leak into our mind, leak into our thought process. Restlessness is coming when the mind cannot settle down on a particular thought, especially when you think of the future. When you think of the future, a lot of uncertainty is there, isn't it, in the future? I mean, nothing is certain in the future. No one knows whether it's going to rain this afternoon, isn't it? You can only guess, but nobody knows for sure. Therefore, any thought about the future is associated with doubt, and that creates uncertainty in the mind and creates restlessness as a result. The mind becomes restless. So worries normally come from the past. Restlessness come when you think of the future. Both of them makes the mind too excited, and then you become unable to calm the mind. So inability to calm the mind is this. Now, be clear about this. Worry and restlessness is not equal to this aversion or sensual desires. When they are not there, when aversion or sensual desires are not driving you, the mind is neutral. neutral, but still, although the mind is neutral, the worry and restlessness can be there. So you may be unable to calm the mind. So therefore, keep this separate from the other hindrances and try to understand that worry and restlessness arrive when the mind has not taken over by the sensual desires or mind has not been taken over by the aversion. An analogy to this is that water surface in the pond is stirred by the wind. So if the wind is strong and the water surface is making waves stirred, then it's difficult to see your own face when you look over it. So worry and restlessness is like those waves on the water surface created by the wind. This water surface is similar to your mind. Similar to your mind. Fifth one, fifth hindrance is called the skeptical doubt. Skeptical doubt, which is a lack of conviction. Lack of conviction, lack of trust will generate skeptical doubt in the mind. For example, you might have a lack of conviction towards meditation also. Okay. Some people believe that meditation can't do anything to the mind. Okay. Although they try to meditate, nothing happens. So they are not convinced or they don't trust that samadhi states are there in the mind or sati states are there in the mind. They are not convinced. So there is a skeptical doubt about the result of meditation, or there is skeptical doubt about the progress or development of the mind. So that kind of thoughts or mental qualities belong to the category called skeptical doubt. Now, what is this equivalent to in the analogy? The water surface become muddy. It's like water in the pond is dark and muddy. So remember those five analogies I gave you. So it's your mind is like a pond. When it is colored, you can't see yourself well. It's like sensual desires have taken over. Right? Sensual desires have taken over. And when aversion takes over, it's like boiling water surface. And when restlessness or worry takes over, it's like the water surface is stirred by the wind. And when the sloth and torpor takes over, it's like the water surface is covered with the algae, that green kind of plant covering the water surface. And the skeptical doubt take over, it's like water surface is too dark to see and also muddy. So equating your mind to that water in the pond will make it easier for you to remember these five. Of course, if they are culprits, if these five are the culprits or the enemies for our inner happiness or for our concentration, we must first study them, isn't it? We must know these enemies very well. Then only we can control them, or we can evade them, or we can avoid them. So hope the five are clear. Let's summarize. Let's summarize the five. First one, the passionate sensory desire or sensual lust is the drive towards pleasing sight, sound, smell, taste, and physical feelings, seeking happiness from outside. Drive to do that is passionate sensory desire. Aversion is kind of rejecting, irritating thoughts relating to wanting to reject feelings of hostility, resentment, hatred, bitterness, anger, all that. Sloth and torpor is heaviness of the body and the dullness of the mind, which induce inertia to the thinking process. Restlessness and worry is the inability to calm our mind because the mind is wandering into the past or to the future. The mind is not capturing the present moment. From the past, worries appear. From the future, restlessness appear. Skeptical doubt is a lack of conviction of what you are doing about the mind. Right. These are the 5 to be aware of, so that we can allow our mind to concentrate on a meditation thought and generate the happiness from within. Then, coming back to that earlier diagram, we know the 5 forces will pull the mind apart, pull the thought process apart, and try to take over the thought process fully. But these 5 are also impermanent, which means they will appear, but they can't remain in the mind. They vanish. Now, for example, there were times that you got angry, but there are times, now a time like this, you may not be angry. So aversion takes over the mind, but then fade away. Sensory desires take over the mind for a short time and then fade away. And that is the nature. The 5 forces, each one will dominate and take over your thought process at a time. And after some time, they will vanish or fade away. That is the nature. Right? Now, I mentioned to you that I would relate these 5 forces, hindrances, to the mental states we studied in our previous discussion. Let's do that now. Now, if you think of the sensory desire, when that mental quality is present in your mind, the mind will be taken to a new mental state. Can you guess what that mental state will be? Now that you know the names of the mental states. So this mental quality called sensory desires will drive the mind towards lustful state. So after a little while, when this sensory desire quality is present within the mind, after a little while, you will find that your mind has become lustful. So it will change the state to the lustful state. So sensory desire is the triggering factor, which is present in the mind to drive into that state. Or this is the excitation, for example. Aversion, maybe you already guessed. Aversion drives us to the hostile mental state. Drive us to the hostile mental state. So aversion is a driving factor or catalyzed, which is present in the mind to drive it towards a hostile state. Sloth and torpor. Out of the mental states, which one is fitting to this? So when there is laziness or dullness in the thought process is contracted. The mind becomes contracted. That's the name of that state, that sleepy kind of mental state. This is worry and restlessness, which does not allow the mind to settle down. So it is the opposite of this, distracted mind, distracted state. And when there is doubt, what will happen? When you doubt everything, right? Too skeptical all the time, then the mind gets deluded because the mind cannot see the causes of anything. So deluded mind. Hope now things become clear. What we are really studying are 5 forces that drive our mental state, ordinary mental states, one by one. So these are the driving forces. As a result, this mental state will come. Aversion is a driving force. As a result, hostile mental state will come. So likewise, you can relate the 5 hindrances as driving forces or driving qualities towards ordinary mental states. And we saw last time that these mental states are also temporary. They are impermanent. They appear and they disappear. Same way, these driving forces, they are appearing and then disappearing. Again, appearing and disappearing from time to time. That's how our day unfolds. Right? When you spend a day, you will find your mind will be driven by these 5 forces all the time. There seems to be no escape, but there is an escape, which we will be discussing under concentration in our next topic. How to escape from these 5 forces to generate inner happiness. There is a topic coming for that later. Any questions so far? I was trying to explain the 5 forces and the resulting 5 mental states. Okay, so things seems to be clear. Now, how do we become mindful of the hindrances? Now, before we expel them from our mind, the first step is to be aware of them when they are present. That is the mindfulness on the hindrances. Okay, like we defined earlier, this is the definition. Awareness of the hindrances as they occur and as they are at the present moment. Right? Awareness of each hindrance as they occur, as it occurs, and as it is at the present moment. Right? So being aware is a wonderful technique. This is called bare awareness without any other contemplation. Coupled with that, if you become aware only about the presence of a hindrance, it's a way of turning this obstacle is the hindrance, to meditation object. Now, hindrance itself is an obstacle to meditation. Hindrance itself is an obstacle to concentration. But this method of becoming mindfulness on a hindrance is turning that obstacle into a meditation object by itself. So you are exploiting the obstacle or using the obstacle as a meditation object here. That itself is a brilliant way of starting to control hindrance. Okay? So that is the sati part or mindfulness part. Later on, you can add contemplation to that as a second stage. In the contemplation, you can think how they arise, how they pass away. You can closely examine arising of each mental quality called hindrance and passing away of that. And if you can do that with full knowledge of the causes, then the meditation is taken to another level where more wisdom is generated about the hindrances. The more the wisdom, more you will be able to control such hindrances. But all this is not expected immediately, right? As you become an experienced meditator, you can keep on adding this full knowledge of the causes. Initially, bare mindfulness, bare awareness is the first step. Second step is arising and passing away. Third step is knowledge of their causes. Hope it is clear. First get the bare awareness, presence or absence, then get awareness of arising and passing away, and then get the knowledge of the cause for each hindrance. Right? So 3 steps you will have to develop. It may take time, right? But being aware that you have to develop over these 3 stages will be useful to you as a meditator. Okay, what are the factors that cause the sensual desires? Here we say knowledge of their causes. This is the part I'm trying to explain now. So what causes the sensual desire or sensual lust? Okay. It's a thought, isn't it? If some attractive mental image appears in your mind, mental image, alternative word is mental formation. If it is pleasing and attractive, that is one condition or one cause for the sensual desire to arise. You remember something suddenly. Suddenly it pops up in your mind. It looks pleasing and attractive. It may be a person, memory of a person, or memory of a place, or memory of a sound, memory of a taste, memory of a touch. It suddenly pops up in your mind as you remember. And another factor is necessary. This alone can't originate the sensual desire. The other factor is you attend to it. The mind attend to that image in an unwise manner. We call it unwise attention. These two, when coupled together, now the mind generates passionate sensual desires. And it's a loop actually. Passionate sensual desire will come and after that it will make this more attractive and unwise attention will come again and it will loop like this. More passionate sensual desire will evolve. It will become stronger. Stronger passionate sensual desire will make you think about this mental image more. And likewise, the mind loops in a very rapid rate. And in a short while, you will find the mind is driven to the lustful state. Okay. So these are the two main causes that make passionate sensual desires arise within our mind. What about the hostile? What about the aversion? How does aversion arise? Knowing these causes will be easy, will make the meditation more complete. So aversion, what kind of mental image will pop up from the mind to generate aversion? It's a kind of annoying or irritating mental image, annoying situation, annoying person, you might suddenly remember, suddenly pop up from the mind. And when that formation pop up and you pay unwise attention to it, If you don't pay attention from your mind, then it will pop up and vanish. But if you unwisely start thinking about that mental image, that scenario, then aversion will be resulting. And again, it will loop like this. Aversion will make you to think about that mental image more, and more unwise attention will be coupled. More aversion will be generated. So likewise, it's a vicious cycle. And at the same time, when aversion is taken over, has taken over your mind, the mind releases the hormone called adrenaline into your blood to excite the body, and more adrenaline will make you think more about this mental image. That way, the vicious cycle will continue until the mental state change to hostile state. Okay. So I think you can think in these lines. I am not going to explain all reasons for 5, but we will generalize the causes for each one of them to arise like this. Dependent co-arising of, I'm sorry, this is not a sense faculty. Dependent co-arising of, it's my mistake, it's hindrance, right? Of a hindrance. Dependent co-arising of a hindrance, of course, that there are several causes supporting each other. First one, closest one is your mental volitions. The mind has to pay attention and think about it. Then that relevant mental image and unwise attention will be there beforehand, prerequisite. Then craving and ignorance will be supporting. So when these are supporting each other, these 3 levels are supporting each other, hindrance will become stronger and will appear in the mind, arise in the mind. And vanishing also in the opposite direction. When mental volitions are absent, or mental image is absent, or craving is absent, it will vanish. Right? So hindrances also appear and disappear, not automatically. They appear for a reason. They appear due to causes, and they disappear due to the absence of the causes. So it's not accidental. These things don't happen accidentally. They happen, they arrive, or they appear in the mind due to these causes. Craving and ignorance supporting mental image and unwise attention. MI is mental image and unwise attention, and that supports mental volitions. Therefore, hindrance will appear. And when mental volitions disappear, when each one of them disappear, you notice hindrance will fade away. So we can see appearance and disappearance of a hindrance is also not accidental. They happen for reasons, for causes, and they vanish for the absence of the causes. So that understanding is the wisdom we require on hindrances. That's the wisdom we require on the hindrances. Okay, how do we meditate then? Now that we know the definition of hindrance, we know all 5 separately, and we know how they arise and how they vanish. That knowledge, how do we convert to a practice? How do we convert to a practice? These are the steps to follow. After the break, we will do this meditation, but let me highlight the steps. First, you need to bring the awareness of the mind to capture the present moment activity happening, or activity taking place in the mind. Then capture the presence or absence of the particular or chosen hindrance. You can choose a particular hindrance. If you like, you can stimulate it to generate and then capture the presence. Right? even the absence you can capture at a particular moment. If you think your mind is not having the aversion, becoming aware of the absence of aversion is also part of meditation, right? Is also part of this meditation. Third, identify that as your internal thing, because you get direct insight, directly you feel about that hindrance. But first step is you become aware that this kind of a hindrance is present in other minds, external living beings' mind at the same moment. Not all of them, some of them, some of the minds will be taken over by this particular hindrance that you are thinking of right at this moment. So that awareness you generate. Then become aware that this hindrance exists not only internally but externally as well. So realize that hindrances are widespread in the minds of all living beings. It's a natural phenomenon. Next step is to contemplate about arising and passing away. So when arising, you notice it. When passing away, you notice that it is passing away. And if possible, with the full knowledge of the causes that I mentioned earlier. That leads to the realization that hindrances arise and pass away, not accidentally, but due to causes. And that will help you to realize the impermanent nature of the hindrances in your mind. So those are the 10 steps you need to complete in the mindfulness of hindrances. When being mindful, you don't try to oppose the hindrance or support the hindrance. You pay wise attention, not unwise attention. Wise attention means you just try to notice it, identify it. It's like supposing there is a thief trying to enter your house, and the moment he realizes that you have noticed him, that you are aware that he is about to do something bad, that itself will discourage him, and he might leave. The same way, if you notice that a particular hindrance is trying to do something bad to your mind, that being noticed itself, being aware about it itself may be enough to suppress it. But you don't go against it or you don't support it. You just become an observer and neutrally become aware of the presence or the absence. So that's the special thing, special ability we need to develop. Right, that's all the theory about the hindrances. Take a break. After the break, we will simulate these hindrances in our mind and try to do a meditation for your reference, which you can use to practice later. Okay, let's have the break here.